I'm really excited about today's topic. We have Emily Gooding joining us today to talk about how authors can leverage the Indie Author Project to reach new readers through public libraries. Emily is a community engagement manager at BiblioBoard. She coordinates library programming for indie authors, and she is here with us today. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you all so much for having me on here today. We're always so excited to connect with new writers groups, especially such a robust kind of team like you all. Like April mentioned, I work for a company called BiblioBoard, and we primarily focus on connecting independent and local authors with public libraries and readers. We also do a lot of work with other creatives like musicians, poets, photographers, what have you, trying to just kind of build local community collections. But again, our main focus is definitely on the independent author side of things. So we're very excited to chat with you all today. One thing to mention before we kind of dive on in is that we are primarily geared towards ebooks and digital content rather than physical books at the moment. We're definitely looking to expand going forward, but for now it is primarily ebooks, just something to note there. But just a little kind of background on the Indie Author Project in general. As I mentioned, we kind of strive to connect public libraries, independent authors, and readers. And this came about almost about 8 years ago now. It started out off being called the Selfie program, in case anyone familiar with that from back in the day. And it came about after talking with a lot of libraries that we were working with, as well as self-published authors at the time. And we were hearing a lot of feedback that with how popular independent publishing had become in recent years, while it oftentimes easier than ever to get books into independently published books into commercial spaces, of course, with Amazon kind of taking over in that regard, we were often finding it could be pretty difficult for a lot of independent authors to get their books into not just local libraries, but also, of course, library systems all across the country. And then, of course, on the flip side, talking to a lot of our libraries, we were hearing a lot of feedback that it wasn't that they didn't want to include and incorporate self-published and independent works. It's just that with the volume of independent books coming out every year, it could be kind of hard to identify and acquire the quality or even the local books out of that kind of wall of content. So the Indie Author Project kind of came about to try to facilitate that relationship a little bit and make it easier for both authors and libraries to be able to connect and get these great, most often locally written independent books kind of into the hands of that avid patron reading base.
Emily, does this also include audiobooks?
We are in the midst of launching our pilot for audiobooks. The one hurdle we didn't really anticipate as much on the audiobook side is what we were looking into, of course, like the production quality of audiobooks, especially for independent authors. But then on the flip side, we've been learning a lot based on the authors that we've been partnering with, that more often than not, even authors who might own all the rights to their digital and print content on the audiobook side, if another organization is producing it for you, it can be challenging to have the rights to distribute it, which has been kind of the main hurdle that we found. Because with the Indie Author Project, it's totally non-exclusive. So you maintain total and complete ownership of your work, or you could continue to pursue other avenues, selling, marketing, and distributing. But we found that that's been a little challenging to be able to have authors interested who have audiobooks that are well produced, that they also have the rights to be able to distribute. But our platform does support audiobook. We're ready and excited to go into kind of that new territory, especially on the children's book side of things.
Rula was saying Findaway Voices has a service to narrators and you own your own audio. So is that part of what you're considering as you guys think about venturing into that area?
So we've been talking with Findaway actually quite a bit in the past. We host an Indie Author Day every November where we partner with all different kinds of other organizations, Findaway Voices being one of them. So for authors who haven't produced an audiobook yet, we realize that that's kind of the best audience to be reaching out to, since they can pursue all avenues and figure out exactly what works best for them, including the option of course, of Findaway there. Before, we were seeing authors who already had produced an audiobook or had one produced for them, that it was more challenging for them to be able to distribute their audiobook through our program. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I love the Findaway Books model in general. It's kind of a cool crowdsourcing effort there. And with the Indie Author Project in general, we kind of take a twofold approach to kind of connecting these libraries and authors and readers. On one side, on the more kind of inclusive side, we have our local author archive, which we have for all 50 states, as well as our our provinces, for our Canadian libraries. And those host pretty much all of the submissions from authors within that area and are available to participating libraries throughout that region. So kind of right off the bat, a nice little bump in potential new readership and exposure there. But then on the flip side, on the more kind of exclusive or competitive side, if you will, we partner with some curators. We started out just partnering with Library Journal, and now we've expanded to also bringing Publishers Weekly on board as well. And they're going through all of these submissions and trying to weed out the best of the best out of the submissions that are coming through, which go into a curated collection, what we call Indie Author Project Select, which April just had one of her books chosen as Indie Author Project Select, which is very exciting. And so we just recently expanded to children's books for that also, which is awesome to see such a nice influx of really high quality children's ebooks coming through. And that kind of curation component really makes a big difference for our library partners so that they can confidently promote these independently published work, knowing that they've gone through a trusted vetting process, especially in the Library Journal side, since Library Journal's been around for quite a while. And they also are able to acquire these books as a set. Not that they won't know these participating authors' names eventually or titles just right off the bat, but from the get-go, being able to look at it as kind of a nice set of really high-quality, independently published works that they can offer with unlimited access to their patrons. Since right now there's a lot of tension between some of the big five publishers and libraries in terms of lending rights. They're trying to kind of make it a little more challenging and a little more expensive for libraries to offer traditionally published ebooks, which has been a nice way for the Indie Author Project ebooks to kind of sneak on in there. And so for these authors who are chosen as Indie Author Project Select, not only do they have that kind of seal of approval from the curators and being included in these top best of the best collections, these Indie Author Project Select collections, which I'll go ahead and pull up over here. I can even pull up April's book just as a fun, very relevant example. We've also incorporated a new author royalty paying component there, where authors who do have titles chosen as Indie Author Project Select, still totally non-exclusive. You can still have your ebooks available digitally for libraries for sale individually. However, if you'd like, you can opt into our author royalty paying program, where you'll receive royalties not only based on the sale of these collections, but also on the success of your book in those collections. Right now, we have participating libraries all across the US and Canada, some of which include multiple states where the entire state has access to these ebooks. We have one international sale so far. Perth in Australia has purchased these ebooks, which is very exciting. And we're definitely trying to kind of continue that overseas efforts. Lending rules for libraries outside of North America can be a little different and varied depending on what the country is or what the region is. But yes, for right now, it is primarily all across the US and Canada. But like I said, there are some entire states like California, Minnesota, Illinois, Texas, where the entire state has access to these books. So not only are you able to then receive royalties based on the usage of your book in these collections, but also just that kind of exposure and recognition. Every 2 years, Library Journal does a patron survey of patrons all across the US and Canada. And pretty consistently, they found that library patrons and users who discover a new author through the library go on to purchase a book by that author, which is something that we're always really excited to see. And with that, to kind of go along with that, we also allow when you're submitting or encourage when you're submitting, you can include a link to your author website or to your preferred digital marketplace. So if someone is reading a book in one of these collections, they can also go right on over to be able to purchase it as well. Overall, that's kind of the twofold approach that we take there in terms of these collections. And again, just to drive home before I can show how you're able to submit if you're interested, that it's totally non-exclusive. You still maintain total and complete ownership. And for any reason, you can request to have your book removed at any time. So we definitely have a lot of authors who participate in KDP Select or other exclusive programs or time-sensitive programs where they'll request to have a book taken down for a couple months and then ask to have it added back. So a lot of options.
If you are selected and you opt in for this select program, then you do have to not be exclusive with Amazon, correct?
You have the ability to waive your royalties, so you can still be part of the collection, but waive your royalties. So some people interpret their Amazon agreement as not being violated by that. Others view it as a bit stricter. We definitely kind of defer to authors in that regard. But either way, we do allow people to either opt out or opt back in, depending on
Okay.
what their kind of timeline is with KDP Select in particular.
Sarah's asking, how long does it take to know if we are selected?
It does kind of vary slightly. We have annual contests that we are actually in the midst of right now, where have a ton more submissions than we do throughout the year otherwise. So sometimes it can be a little longer in that regard. But we say for inclusion in your local collection, so in your statewide indie collection, so in the example I had pulled up before, your indie South Carolina, usually you'll receive an email within 2 weeks or so
Mhm.
being included on the local side of things. But then in terms of consideration for Indie Author Project Select, we usually say to expect 6 to 8 weeks, but sometimes it can be much faster than that, especially for authors who are submitting maybe their second or third book. If their curator's already kind of familiar with you, sometimes that can definitely help as well. Also on the children's book side of things, the review process is a bit faster just based on the length of the books in general. But otherwise, I would typically say in terms of finding out if you're selected, it would be about 6 to 8 weeks there.
And Heather asked a question. She said, in Canada, I think we need a CIP number to be found by librarians and don't qualify for CIP. How does your organization manage that? I'll just jump in and say, I go to cipblock.com to get CIPs for my authors and those in the work group. So you might want to look at that. Emily, do you have any feedback on that as well?
In order to submit and be included in your local collection, so in this instance, like I'm showing here, Indie South Carolina, you don't need to have a CIP or an ISBN. However, to be included in the royalty paying, if you are chosen as Indie Author Project Select, you need to have one in order to opt into the royalty paying feature or royalty paying component. But in terms of kind of discoverability and being found by librarians, that's kind of one of the main things about this program is that it allows librarians to select a group of, for example, like we're seeing here, it's Indie Ontario. Librarians are able to purchase the top 100 independently published books from local Ontario authors in our collections. They don't necessarily need to be searching by author or title. They can kind of browse by genre or region, like I mentioned there. If someone's finishing up a new edition of their book, just definitely something to be aware of if you submit, have your book included, and even if you just want to update the description or the purchase URL or the cover, no matter what it is, you can always update a previous submission and we'll just replace it with whatever the most recent one is. And in terms of submitting in general, you can always visit indieauthorproject.com. I'm on our For Authors page here, where you can, of course, learn a little bit more about the program, eligibility, the very general rubric, the rubric that our curators go off of for inclusion in Indie Author Project Select. And here you'll also see the ability to share your book. Here, once again, you can get a refresher on the program in general, requirements, timeline. And then the process to submit is pretty straightforward, doesn't take too long at all here. You essentially are just providing some basic contact information, which we don't share with anyone else. That's just for us to be able to provide you with updates on if your book is submitted, if your book is selected, when it's added to your local collection, updates on the events that we're sponsoring in your area, as well as, of course, uploading your file. We support both PDF and EPUB file format. I definitely do recommend if you have an EPUB format, submitting that, just like we saw in April's book here. This is what an EPUB will look like on the reader. It just tends to kind of reflect more of the traditional physical book reading experience. But other than that, you just provide some basic details for your book, description, title, any other contributors that you might like to have included. We currently don't support Mobi files, but however, I know there are quite a few online tools that you can transform those into EPUB or PDF. It's definitely really helpful to be able to have those in multiple formats. And you can also upload your cover image separately if it's not already included in your book file. And then you do at the end accept the terms of agreement, which, like I said before, you still maintain total and complete ownership of your work. You're just affirming that you have the rights to be submitting the entirety of the work that you're looking to submit. So including any cover art, any interior artwork, of course, the actual content, the text content itself. So we've had less than 3, I think, incidents of copyright infringement claims, and all of which were misunderstandings. So a good track record in that regard. But that is essentially what you're affirming there.
Is this open for international authors or is it only the US and Canada?
So it's open to authors from all across the world. Currently, we are only supporting for the Indie Author Project Select side of things. It does have to be an English language title. We're looking to get multilingual curators to kind of help support foreign language titles. And at the moment, like I said before, all of our libraries that have access to these collections are primarily based in the US and Canada, but we do have quite a few participating authors from outside North America, including multiple ones that are included in our Indie Author Project Select collections. Once you submit, you'll receive a confirmation email from us letting you know that we've received your title. We do a kind of a quality control check before anything is added, just to make sure that everything's technically sound, that it is an intentional literary submission. We've definitely seen some people have grabbed the wrong PDF off their computers before. I think we had someone submit their W-2 by accident a couple years ago. Definitely making sure we don't publish anything like that. And then once your submission is added to your respective local collection, like we see here with Indie Ontario, you'll receive another email letting you know that it's live, including a link to your book, as well as a little checklist of best practices. But so right off the bat, you'll have our contact information. So if you ever, just like someone mentioned there, if you move to a different state or province, we can make sure that your book kind of follows you. We have a lot of military families who participate who are kind of bi-coastal and things like that. And we're definitely more than happy to make sure that it's available wherever you're located. So that kind of open communication is always there. So yes, if you do move to a new state, you don't need to resubmit unless you'd like to update your book file itself.
One thing I'd love to see you talk a little bit more about is the process of what happens after it's been submitted. And is it Publishers Weekly? I saw Library Journal as well as a partner here. So how does that get evaluated, and how do the selections get made for the broad select criteria?
Yes, exactly. So we, on our side, on the Indie Author Project team, we do that just initial high level kind of quality control check. Like I said, just to make sure everything's technically sound, looking okay. Once it passes that step, it'll be added to your respective local collection. So in the submission process, we'll ask for your home library as well as your state or province. Home library, so we're able to let that library know that a local author has submitted and now has their book available through this program, and state or province, so we know which local collection to place it in. From there, it'll enter that more competitive curation process where, just like April mentioned, Library Journal started out as our primary partner, kind of especially in launching this whole program. Publishers Weekly more recently came on board, and they'll do a much more in-depth kind of vetting and selection process, looking to identify kind of the best of the best out of all of these submissions. And that's done on a rolling basis year round. And here on this indieauthorproject.com authors section, you can see the rubric, not incredibly specific in terms of, it's not a numerical rubric or anything like that, but you can see the overall criteria that they're looking for. We definitely try to strive for transparency in that regard and make sure that this is available and visible to everyone. And then if your book is selected, it'll be added to the respective genre-based Indie Author Project Select collection. And then I think right now, 3 times a month, we're sending out emails for those who have been chosen, inviting them to opt in to our Indie Author Project Select royalty paying kind of feature there. And then going forward, like I mentioned, we also send out very infrequent, but I think once a month, author newsletters, letting people know about any library-based events in the area, featuring different participating authors, and any contests, especially that we're participating in or promoting in any area.
You mentioned that there was some things going on right now with contests. So how is that something separate from the Indie Author Project?
So every year we host our annual regional contests where we partner with libraries all across each of these participating regions. This year we have 14 states and 2 Canadian provinces participating, and we assemble judging committees of librarians in the area, so kind of the foremost authority on these kind of things. Right now, we're choosing the best adult fiction and YA fiction in each area, and next year we're expanding to children's as well, which is very exciting. This year, we also did our first foreign language contest or pilot contest in Illinois. We have a Spanish language contest going on, which has been really exciting. We've received a lot of great feedback for that. But so with these contests, it's totally free to submit. And for those who are identified as kind of the winner in each of these categories for each participating region. There's, of course, a monetary prize, as well as a whole host of different promotional and marketing opportunities, including events at local libraries, conferences, as well as inclusion in the Library Journal Best of Books issue, which comes out annually each December, a blog post that we did a couple of months back on our winners from last year, interviews with each of the winners in each genre there. So really exciting for these librarians to be able to discover kind of new local authors that they maybe otherwise wouldn't have been able to identify.
Andrea's asking, does your book need to be published?
So it doesn't necessarily need to be published kind of in the traditional sense. And we do have authors, especially authors that who maybe are just wrapping up their initial iteration of their manuscript. Since you can always resubmit after polishing it up a little bit or adding a new cover or anything, you're definitely able to submit right after you finish up your initial manuscript, even just to get it out there and get some initial feedback from some early readers. And that can, of course, like I said, always be updated and replaced going forward.
And Sarah's wondering, she submitted the PDF. Will she have the opportunity to go back in and submit other formats?
Definitely. So going forward, if you end up having an EPUB format, if you resubmit, we'll replace your existing version with whatever the most recent submission is. I can show you here from the reader end of what an EPUB versus a PDF looks like. So what we had just seen with April's book was an EPUB, and here is what a PDF looks like. So you can kind of see the individual pages rather than seeming more like an actually bound book. But again, both are fully accessible and with unlimited access to, there's no holds or wait. So it can be great for things like one book community reads when libraries pick up things like that. But that's just kind of the main difference there in terms from the reader perspective. Especially on the children's book side of things, if anyone does have books that have audio or visual components, we definitely support that. So if anyone has that in mind, just know that you're definitely able to submit those and have that supported.
So when you say support audio, help me understand what that means. Like I have, for example, an original song and animation. So is that something that I could or should be submitting so that people can also see that as well as the ebook itself?
Right now, it's supported if it's built into your actual book file. So just like you said, when you have some authors who will submit and they have songs that will play depending on which page you open or animations, exactly. Right now, you can't submit them as separate kind of accompaniments, but if they're built on in, that's supported for sure. We were really just trying to make it easier for libraries to be inclusive of something beyond the big five publisher kind of standard names that are out there that they are not paying to the author, but paying to the publisher, kind of an arm and a leg to let people check out, especially on the digital side of things, which you would think, since there's theoretically shouldn't be a limit to the amount of times you should be able to check out a digital item. We really want to support libraries in that regard and be inclusive of homegrown ebooks, locally sourced content, that they're able to not be afraid of succeeding. So if they have a John Grisham novel that gets checked out 10 times in a row, oftentimes they have to pay premiums each time that it gets checked out beyond that. And while they have always, of course, wanted to be inclusive of new voices and self-published authors, having the bandwidth to go out and identify and acquire those books individually has always been a big challenge, which is kind of where we could be able to come in and help facilitate a little bit.
And it's amazing for authors too, because we have been doing lots of emails and calling and, going down and trying to donate a book to a library, and haven't met with a lot of success there. At least I haven't. And the individuals that I know who have gone that route haven't been as successful broadly as I would have liked to see. So this helps us to bypass that. I just love that we have this project to work through. It's a great feather in your cap as well, because if you let them know that you're in the select program as well, then that's one more way that they can engage and pull in. What kind of role can authors play to continue to help this program grow?
Yeah, so that's something that we've been trying to be much more kind of cognizant of, especially recently, making sure that we're supporting authors who are participating in this, especially authors who have had the exciting news that their book has been chosen as Indie Author Project Select, but then come to find out that no book in their area or no library in their area is participating in the program. So we've actually recently, just this past month, started a campaign reaching out to authors just like that, providing them with some pre-written copy. Not that anyone needs to help authors write emails or anything like that, but providing kind of sample emails that we've collaborated with participating libraries on, to what language they would be most responsive to, so that authors can use that language and reach out to their local libraries, to libraries in their area, saying, this program's going on, I'm participating in it, these are all the benefits, not just for me, but for you as well. And we've been really excited to see that kind of start to take off. And of course, how supportive all the authors have been, how engaged they are, makes it so much easier. But another thing we found a lot in terms of just engaging with local libraries in general has been oftentimes when you're going to reach out, not just looking to have your book be included in their catalog, but also reaching out, offering a program or an event, not just an author signing, but if there's any event or specific topic that you feel comfortable presenting on, or any other local writers or authors in your area that you could do a panel on, kind of proposing programming like that has so far, what we've found, has been to be really well received. So Indie Author Project, we are paid by libraries for the technology, not for the books themselves, which sounds like a very small distinction, but essentially they're paying for, so we offer geolocation authentication, which is just like what you would use for Uber on your phone. So trying to encourage people who might not be typically digital library users to be able to just instantly, one click of a button, start reading these books without having to enter their library card number. So libraries are paying us that kind of platform fee. Otherwise, for the royalties, it's split between the cost of the sale in terms of what the authors receive, half based on the cost of the sale, and then the other half based on the usage of your title in that collection. So that's kind of the breakdown there. And we are in the midst of doing a focus group on publishing our first year of these results for the author royalty pool, since it was kind of a trial situation, trying to figure out as we went along. But so we hopefully should be publishing more data on how it's gone so far. How we price our services is based on population served, which makes it a lot easier for especially smaller, more rural libraries to be able to afford these services and collections. But in terms of grants, actually a grant where I've just been looking into very recently, I'm not sure if it extends outside of the United States, but the ARP grant has just allocated almost $200 million to libraries and museums, and are now actively inviting people to submit proposals to receive that money, which does include funding for ebook collections.
Any plans to include school libraries? Heather's wondering.
Been trying to engage with school libraries more and more. We've had our most success when we have buy-in or interest on this whole state level, where all of their libraries, schools, museums are included in it, and we have everyone set up with that location-based authentication. But for individual school libraries, we've been kind of struggling trying to make that connection.
There's nothing preventing them from purchasing, right?
I would think that primarily just financial constraints or allocating budget elsewhere. Yeah.
Do you have a map or anything that shows where there are programs currently that are going on? Because you said there are partnerships in certain places. Of course, that's going to continue to grow. But for those authors that live in those places near where they do have those partnerships, it would be nice to know where they are.
So we're in the midst of putting together our kind of comprehensive map with details. Like this first region that we did was California, where you can see all of our library partnerships as well as our programs, any media and press mentions. You can also, if you go to library.biblioboard.com or download the BiblioBoard Library app, you can see in a drop-down menu, you can look up to see if your local library is participating. There's a full drop-down menu of libraries that have access to these collections there.
You said there's an app, a mobile app as well?
Yeah, so BiblioBoard Library is available on the web, as well as a free and native app for tablets and mobile devices. The only kind of device that we're not compatible with is the original Kindle, like the Kindle Paperweight. It doesn't support multimedia apps in general.
Would you like to let people know how they can reach or what your contact information is?
If you go to submit to the Indie Author Project, and if you reach out to the support option in the midst of submitting, or if you reach out after submitting, that contact information that you'll receive in that follow-up email, I do receive that, as well as two of my other coworkers. So definitely a couple different ways to reach out, but my direct email address is emily@biblioboard.com. And like I said, I'd be happy to, especially for those who happen to already be in the areas that we have programs going on or partnerships going on, I would be more than happy to connect you. And I'm sure in the libraries would also be really excited. You can also connect with us on social media. I run our Twitter account, but we are also on Instagram and Facebook as well. Indie Author Project or Indie Author Proj on Instagram.
So much incredible information, Emily. Thank you for your time and for spending it with us tonight. And this has been amazing. I will definitely be following up with you, looking for other opportunities for indie authors like myself to go ahead and help move this forward and also participate in these great contests and things that you have going on. Can't wait till next year for the children's book contests.
Definitely. Well, thank you all so much for having me. Thank you so much for letting me talk so much with you all tonight. Thank you all. Take care.
All right. Have a wonderful evening.